Recent research has suggested that up to 50% of athletes struggle with anxiety and nerves prior to competitions. It's one of the most common mental struggles athletes have to deal with. But just because it's one of the most common things athletes deal with, doesn't reflect its ability to prevent the most talented athletes in the world from performing their best. But what is anxiety? Well, there are two different ways of looking at what anxiety is. Many researchers believe anxiety is a feeling of worry about a future outcome. For most athletes, this will result in thoughts such as, I really hope I perform well, or I must win this match. Other researchers believe anxiety is an overwhelming desire for a specific outcome. When you go into a competition or a training session, you know what outcome you want to achieve, whether that's to complete all of your intervals, complete a task in a certain amount of time, or win a race. But anxiety occurs when we are completely fixated by obtaining this outcome. We have to complete all of the intervals, or we must win this race, or else we failed. This heaps a lot of pressure on and makes it difficult to perform our best. So how does anxiety actually affect how we perform? It firstly affects our thoughts. More specifically, we start to think negatively about the future. For instance, we have a lot of what-if thoughts. What if I crash? What if I can't lift a particular weight? What if I tire too early? It also leads us to have negative thoughts about the consequences of performing badly. This is commonly experienced as thoughts such as, everyone will think I'm rubbish if I don't win. Anxiety also affects our body. It commonly leads to butterflies in the stomach, trembling hands, and increased muscle tension, which makes it difficult to perform to our full potential. Finally, anxiety affects how we behave. Some athletes become very quiet when they feel nervous, just wanting to stay away from other people and hang out by themselves to try and calm themselves down. Other athletes become fidgety and end up double or triple checking their equipment, just in case. But if so many athletes experience anxiety, why do we find it so hard to overcome? Well, one of the biggest reasons we struggle to overcome anxiety is we can't run away from it. Anxiety is based in our minds. No matter what we do or where we go to try and get away from it, we take our anxiety with us. Often it feels like trying to run away from your own shadow, which becomes incredibly frustrating and can overwhelm some athletes. Secondly, anxiety is difficult to overcome because every person can experience nerves in a different way. One athlete might feel nervous when they line up next to their competitors and think, oh, I've got no chance. But for another athlete, their anxiety might be because of their expectations for their performance. They think, I've got to perform well or else my season's over. Because anxiety arises for a number of different reasons and it affects how we think, feel and behave, it's difficult to overcome by ourselves. But when working with a professional, anxiety can be fairly straightforward to work through. Finally, anxiety is hard to overcome because it prevents us from performing our best. Anxiety often takes the joy out of an activity we love to do, and it'd be hard to handle when we now start to fear competing in the sport we used to love. I mentioned a few of the common causes of anxiety a couple of moments ago, but let's look at 4 main reasons why athletes experience anxiety. The first is fear of failure. When the thought that things might not go to plan and we might not succeed begin to cross our minds, it can be hard to cope with. Often our minds paint a picture of what will happen if we don't win this race or fail to perform our best, and this can quickly lead to anxiety about upcoming competitions. The second main cause is social evaluation. There's always a clear-cut hierarchy in sport. You have the winner who's number 1, and then every other athlete has their spot. This makes it easy for people to compare us to other athletes, and if we're coming in 5th place consistently, then our minds begin to wonder what other people must think about how good we are. Thoughts like, oh, they will think I'm rubbish, or I've got to impress this coach, cross our minds, put a lot of pressure on our shoulders, and lead to anxiety. The third cause is expectations. If we have incredibly high expectations of how we should perform in a competition, then we can very easily begin to feel anxious, because the difference between success and failure is very clear. If we win, we succeeded. But if we come second or lower, then we feel like we failed. And with these expectations comes a great deal of pressure, and our nerves begin to grow as our competition approaches. The final main cause is other competitors. If we're competing against talented competitors, it can be very easy to begin to worry about how good they are, and by comparison, how we might struggle to match up to them. Athletes often think, oh, that's the athlete who won 3 competitions last month. Or, that's the world champion, they're so strong, I've got no chance. Athletes have the tendency to compare themselves to their competitors, and often these comparisons are unfavourable and end up with the athlete talking themselves out of the competition before it's even begun. Now, when dealing with anxiety, it often feels like we're the only ones struggling to handle nerves, and this is not the case. As I mentioned earlier, up to 50% of athletes have struggled with anxiety at some point, so you're not alone. There are plenty of famous athletes who have struggled to deal with pre-competition nerves. For example, Sir Chris Hoy said in his autobiography, "I had a real internal battle to push myself through my fears and panic, no matter how painful it might be. I sometimes had to force myself onto the bike." And Wayne Rooney has said in interviews, "We didn't win many at Anfield. I used to love the games, but to be honest, before I used to feel sick. I was so nervous. It was a horrible feeling." Anxiety is something that affects athletes at every level of competition. So how can working with Mind.Set.Action help you get a handle on anxiety? Well, one of the biggest problems with anxiety is that it makes us feel helpless and out of control. After all, we can't run away from it, and it affects how we think, feel and act, making it difficult for us to see how we can possibly overcome it. The first thing we do is to teach you techniques to help you regain a sense of control. This will boost confidence and help with the next step, where I show you how to turn towards the source of anxiety. That might sound scary at first, but there are special ways of addressing anxiety which are quick, easy, and help you take the first steps towards competing without nerves. For more information, you can email me, jack@mindsetaction.co.uk, or go to mindsetaction.teachable.com. The link for that is in the description below this video.